People living in Hawaii need to make at least twice the average salary in the rest of the US to live comfortably. Those who aren't ready to pay $5 for a gallon of milk have to look for happiness elsewhere. And year after year, the state makes it to the top lines of the population loss rating. While the local middle class is leaving, Hawaii is turning into a heaven for billionaires. Just 37 of them already own 11% of all the private land in the Aloha State. Larry Ellison, co-founder of the Oracle Corporation, bought 98% of the island of Lanai, including the grocery store, the only gas station, and the community newspaper, all for a nifty sum of $300 million. This makes him the boss and landlord of everyone on the island. Mark Zuckerberg, the Meta founder and CEO, is building a huge compound on Kauai with more than a dozen buildings, at least 30 bedrooms and bathrooms, a tunnel leading to a 5,000 square feet underground bunker, and 11 tree houses connected by intricate rope bridges. The local residents with ancestral rights to this land lost in court and had to put it up for auction. The Malaysian tycoon Kvek Leng Khan owns a third of the island of Molokai through his business empire. Of course, these and some of the world's richest people create new jobs and invest in development projects on the islands. But still, nearly 2/3 of the locals believe that their state is being run for tourists at the expense of the residents. A lot of famous people like to live in Wailea and Makina in Maui because it's peaceful and gives them the privacy they want. Oprah Winfrey has a big house up in the local hills. Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, reportedly bought a huge house by La Perouse Bay for $78 million. Other famous people who live in Maui include Clint Eastwood, Mick Fleetwood, Jim Carrey, and Alice Cooper. When you visit Maui, you can see a special Hall of Fame display at the airport showing those celebrities. It's supposed to celebrate their ties with the island, but the local people feel like it only highlights the huge gap between the new super wealthy residents and the local people who can barely afford to live there. As the rich and famous keep buying property across Hawaii, home prices continue to rise. It's more expensive to buy a house here than in Washington, D.C. or California. Part of the reason for such high pricing is how the land itself is formed. Hawaii is bigger than most people think, but it's made up of lots of separate islands that are spread far apart. Even though the islands are big, not all of the land can be used to build houses or neighborhoods. Unlike most of the US, which has a lot of flat land and gentle hills, much of Hawaii is made up of steep, rocky mountains and rough terrain. This kind of land is very hard to build on or live on. Because of this, most of the people on Hawaii, about 1 million of them, live on the island called Oahu. The other islands, like the Big Island, have far fewer people. There isn't enough land for everyone, and that makes it hard for people who have lived in Hawaii their whole lives to afford a place to live. Tourism makes up 21% of the state's economy. Most of the visitors come from the United States and Japan. Tourists bring in tons of money, but there's a problem. Depending too much on tourism can be risky for Hawaii. In the recent years, because of we all know what happened, a health rule called the Conditional Sail Order stopped cruise ships from coming to Hawaii for health safety reasons. Many other tourist activities, like visiting beaches or attending events, were also shut down. With fewer visitors, Hawaii earned a lot less money, which hurt the economy. To avoid this problem in the future, Hawaii has been trying to make money in other ways besides tourism. One idea is to invest more in fishing, but this hasn't been easy. At some point, there was too much fishing going on here, and now Hawaii has to bring in 63% of its seafood from other places instead of catching it nearby. There are farms here that grow pineapples, macadamia nuts, coffee, and produce milk. But now, farming isn't as important as it was 100 years ago. Probably one of the reasons is that it's more profitable to sell the land for houses or hotels than to use it for farming. This change made Hawaii even more dependent on tourism and made living in the Aloha State so very pricey. Honolulu is reported to be the 7th most expensive city to live in the U.S. A family of 4 spends around $8,000 a month here, and a single adult will have to pay, on average, $2,500. Food alone costs around $500 a person for 1 month. Most of the food in Hawaii, about 85 to 90%, comes from faraway places. Since it has to travel more than 2,500 miles to get there, around 1/3 of all the food spoils along the way, especially because Hawaii is warm and humid. This waste makes things more expensive because stores know they'll lose some of their products and charge more to cover their losses. There aren't as many stores competing with each other. If stores don't compete, they have no reason to lower their prices. On top of that, they have to pay a lot for things like rent and electricity, so they raise their prices to make up for those costs. Speaking of electricity, an average bill is around $200, which is almost 90% higher than the national average. Yep, the Aloha State has the highest energy costs in the country. And perhaps that's why people in Hawaii use the least amount of electricity compared to other states. But their bills are still much higher. The main reason is the price per unit of electricity, called a kilowatt hour. 1 unit of electricity costs almost 40 cents. To compare, Utah has the cheapest rate at just 10.91 cents. It's so expensive in Hawaii because most of the electricity comes from oil, and that oil has to be shipped to the islands. Since Hawaii depends so much on oil, energy costs go up and down with oil prices. On top of all that, the income tax is some of the highest in the country. A quarter of all households in Hawaii spent more than their income in 2024. To survive, people used savings and credit cards and cut expenses. They also had to work more hours or get an extra job. They were forced to sell their belongings and borrow money from relatives, banks, or other lenders. Almost half of residents are in the category called ALICE, and it has nothing to do with Alice in Wonderland. It means asset limited, income constrained, employed. More than 1 in 3 residents lives below the ALICE annual income threshold. And then there's also legislation that further complicates things for Hawaii. It says that any goods shipped between places in the U.S. must be carried on ships that are owned, built, and run by Americans. This makes shipping much more expensive because U.S. ships and crews cost a lot more than ships from other countries. Most of the world's ships don't follow these rules because they're registered in countries like Panama. Because of this, Hawaii can still get goods from places like East Asia using cheaper ships, but if they want something from the mainland US, it costs way more money. In fact, this law costs Hawaii over $1 billion every year. This law also makes it really hard for Hawaii to grow businesses because everything is so expensive. The cost of insurance is also going up. This is because the islands are hit by natural disasters like hurricanes and storms more often now. All of this adds up to making life in Hawaii even more expensive. But even despite all that, the state steadily lands high in studies on well-being. Even people who can barely afford a living are mostly happier, or at least less unhappy in Hawaii than in other states. I guess the strong community support, a clean and fantastically beautiful environment, and the ability to have beach parties all year round make up for many hardships.